Thursday at 5 p.m. Welcome to Opposing Views. You're tuned into MX24 TV, and we're back from the hiatus. I'm sure you noticed we're off for a few weeks, but we're back revamped, re-energized, and we're about to serve you back-to-back exciting topics and conversations right here on Opposing Views. My name is Marie-France Fojo. For our topic for discussion today is that in our fight against COVID-19, should the vaccination be compulsory for citizens in Ghana, at least since we're in Ghana, or limited to Ghana? Should the government go ahead and impose a compulsory vaccination on citizens? When we come back from this break, I'll introduce our guest and we'll get right into the conversations. Don't forget, we're live on all our social media platforms at MX24GH. Stay with us. Don't go away.
The Saturday nights just got better.
With unimaginable excitement.
Then toes one girl make it touch it, touch it, touch it, touch it, touch it. Ow, ow, yeah.
The most heated rap battles.
Squad for the work claim soldiers, but on your campo, Bema.
I blow you menace ready, it be me with the top. Godzilla self chop, who be King Kong.
And of course, your A-list celebrity interviews.
I've always said this though, there can only be one Bob Marley, so definitely there should be one episode.
Me? The threesome.
Orafu wa comedy woman nede. Yeah. Nyansa. Don't fuck. Lighter.
With myself, Oforiwa.
I'm Jason Alay, and I do this with the man,
DJ Varosky.
Why the party there today? Hey mama, hey I ever say.
The Bible said that we are not of those who shrink back, but of those who believe to the salvation of the soul. You know, sometimes God wants to do things in circumstances and situations that when people see, they will acknowledge that this is not the effort of man, but this must be the finger of God. So to him, life meant Christ. Life meant living for Christ. Life meant serving Christ. Christ in you, the hope of glory.
ICGC Evangel Temple presents The Kingdom Culture with Reverend Eric Ampofo on MX24. This and every Sunday at 3 p.m. Don't miss out.
Women, especially mothers, are the very core of our existence. Our everyday progression is hinged on the success of their activities, whether they are managing a home, a business, or raising the next generation. This is the Talkative Mom Show, where I interact with hard-working women who are making an impact in society. I'm Eno Craigman, your plug for everything motherhood, especially in today's generation of millennial moms. Join me on the Talkative Mom Show, where I interact with my guests, have fun conversations here on MX24.
Then you is a poem. It's sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be?
You're welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views right here on MX24 TV. Now, before the break, I introduced the topic for discussion today, which is combating COVID-19 and whether or not government needs to impose a compulsory vaccine policy in the country to get more and more people vaccinated and, you know, just reduce the numbers of infections in the country. So we'll hear your thoughts. Don't forget, we're interactive on all social media platforms at MX24GH. You can go to Facebook. We're live over there, as well as Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. So let me introduce my guest and then we'll get straight into the discussion. I have online Dr. Edemson. I know he's the co-chair for the Coalition of Public Health and Justice. We also have Dr. Justice Yangson, who is the Vice President of the Ghana Medical Association. Also online is Anita Asamoah. She's a public health advocate. And Harry Amwene Otre, I beg your pardon. He is the Deputy Executive Secretary for the Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana. And Oluwaseun Oyebamiji is joining us from Turkey as a contributor on this discussion. So, gentlemen and lady, good evening and many thanks for joining us. Right.
Good evening.
Very well. Very well. I hope you can hear me. I understand we don't have Dr. Senanu yet. I was hoping to start with him, but I'll come straight to you, Harry, then, and let's just cut to the chase. In our fight against COVID-19, we've seen government put in a lot of work and a lot of effort to get more and more people vaccinated. Now, we have a group of doctors and civil society organizations who are alleging that government is trying to take the back door to introduce a compulsory vaccination policy by enforcing that in some of its departments and state agencies. People who are not fully vaccinated cannot enter their premises to even access certain services. And for that reason, they see that as a compulsory vaccination policy. Now, they have gone ahead to sue 14 government agencies. Now, first of all, what's your take, or what's your organization's take on whether or not we should have a compulsory vaccination policy, given that the intent is good and welcomed?
Thank you very much for having me on this show.
Right.
First of all, I think I would have to state categorically that whatever I say here are my personal,
very well, that's fine,
professional opinion, and does not represent that of the Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana. Yeah, but my position remains that I do not think that Ghana as a country is ready for vaccine mandates. So in principle, I am not against vaccine mandates, but I don't think the circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment warrant, at least not for a universal mandate. We can look at it in some segregated aspect, but for universal mandates, I personally do not support that. I'm sure going forward, I'll give the chance to explain further why I think it should not be mandatory at this point, universal.
Well, before you get into that explanation, if you can kindly reposition yourself so we don't have the light creeping into your feed, because it's not a good feed. Whilst you do that, I'll bring in Anita Asamoah. Anita Asamoah is a public health advocate. Anita, you're on the ground and you are doing a lot of engagement with health workers as well as people who are accessing certain services, including trying to get vaccines for COVID-19. First of all, what's the response you get from the ground in your engagement with these persons as far as the compulsory vaccine mandate is?
Yes, so good evening, listeners and viewers everywhere. First of all, I think for the COVID vaccination, a lot of people initially had the hesitancy. But over time, as people were taking it and as they found out that some people, when they had taken the vaccine, even if they contracted COVID, it reduces the chances of them dying. Most people, gained the how should I call it? They were ready to get vaccinated. Right. So on ground, a lot of people are now ready to get vaccinated. But as it is, because it is something that because they feel the research on the vaccine was just within a short period, which is true. So a lot of people are still hesitant. But on ground, a whole lot of people have taken the vaccine, I tell you. Some people who were telling you before that, oh, I'm not going to take it, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, they have taken the vaccine. You get it? I was somewhere at a vaccination center in Adabraka the other day, and I saw someone who was like, I'm not going to take the vaccine. She was there with the child. The child who is, above 18 years actually, and she brought him for the vaccination. So I was telling the person I was with that, you see, people are I mean, some people on Facebook saying that they are not going to take it, but behind, they are taking the vaccine. So don't be deceived by it. But that doesn't also mean that we should make it mandatory, because you have to seek the consent of the person before injecting the vaccine. Yes, because it is an emergency authorized use vaccine. So at least you have to seek consent first. With the case that in Ghana here, our cases are going down. And it is not even just here. Some other countries as well are experiencing the numbers going down. So when you're making it a bit mandatory, you're putting some sort of fear in people again. So I think it is just more public education that is needed, if you get my point, so that people would feel free to walk into any vaccination center and take the vaccine. We shouldn't force anyone to do it. And like saying that maybe without, except maybe when you're traveling out of the country, I don't think we should make it something like, if you don't have the vaccine card, I will not let you maybe travel to maybe another region. You get it? But we know that there are some companies that they have their own mandates. If you're not vaccinated, they may not employ you. If you're not vaccinated, they may not let you into their working space, their company. So for example, maybe you work in a laboratory, and the owner of the laboratory or the manager tells you that, please, because of the way this place is sensitive, I would prefer if you are vaccinated. So if you are not vaccinated, please and please get vaccinated, or we'll bring in someone else. But you shouldn't make it to be like something that you are abusing the person's human right as well. You get it? Because when it gets to that extent, then that is another case entirely. So we could just educate the person more on why they should take the vaccine, because the chances of you dying are very low. A lot of people of us caught COVID, but we are walking around. You get it?
Right.
Just because we've been fully vaccinated. And also, being fully vaccinated, I see that a lot of people don't wear the masks now. I mean, you have to still wear the mask. The vaccine doesn't mean that you are, I mean, immune to COVID. We should still wear the mask, especially where we have large crowds. But for this conversation, please, I don't think, from my own view, not the view of anyone I'm working for or consulting for, I don't think it should be mandatory. We should just educate people more to get vaccinated.
Very well. Thank you for those initial submissions. Kindly hold on. I want to introduce Dr. Justice Yankson at this point. He's the Vice President for the Ghana Medical Association. Doc, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, and much welcome.
Very well. Before I get to the main topic for discussion, what's the situation looking like on the ground? It seems things are more relaxed. We're having fewer and fewer infections. Is that the case as you are on the ground and you are interacting directly with officials from the Ghana Health Service as well as other health professionals?
Well, clearly our case count for now is on a downward trend, and that is good news for all of us. But we should not get too excited thinking that it's all over. Until we defeat COVID completely, we have a problem to contend with, because the pandemic is still not over. But at least for now, we are in a far much better position than it used to be some couple of months, weeks back. So we are on course, except that you can also see from the outside that the preventive protocols, generally speaking, are not being adhered to at this point, and that is a source of worry for all of us.
Very well. As far as the vaccination rollout program is concerned, what's the response like? We do know that the president revised the date to meet the vaccination of 20 million Ghanaians by the end of this quarter. Is that looking positive? Is that looking possible?
Well, I think from where we are now, by and large, a lot more people are taking up these vaccinations.
Okay.
What has also become evident is that because we now have a lot more vaccines in the system, the vaccines are now closer to the communities themselves. In the past, you struggled to get to where the vaccination center is, but now with the expanded, distribution network that we are using now, you find the vaccines in the various communities, and I think people are actually taking advantage of this. But until we are done with the statistics in terms of the collation and all that, it will be very difficult to say that just from the point of view that, well, the vaccines are closer to the community, on the surface you see people vaccinating, it means we will hit the target or not. But it is good that the vaccines are closer and people are taking advantage of it. But we may need to wait for the final statistics to know whether come the set deadline would have achieved them or not. Mind you, the last couple of weeks to months, the month of December, part of January and now, if you look at the Ghana Health Services approach, it's been like a special, vaccination exercise that has been put in place. The vaccinators are all over the place. So this roundup activity is actually helping, and let's see how it goes.
Very well. Now, I want to find out what your take or your stance is on whether or not there should be a compulsory institution of people having to take vaccines.
Well, if I get you right, you are talking about the vaccine mandate.
Yeah, the vaccine mandate. Do you think it will be necessary for government to impose one?
Well, as an association, we have also done our own work, and I think on the 10th of February, just about 5 days ago, we issued a public statement. And in that public statement, if you permit me, I'll just summarize the key highlights. One, that vaccines are safe and efficacious in combating COVID-19. So that we are very happy about. Two, that yes, individuals may suffer some side effects, but these are actually normal. The GMA fully supports the COVID-19 vaccination rollout as is being done now. And we are of the opinion that except people who have been excluded for medical reasons, every person living in Ghana should be encouraged to get vaccinated. We also think that at this point, we believe that while government has the power to institute a vaccine mandate, the dictates of the Public Health Act, we are of the considered opinion, and by we I mean the Ghana Medical Association, that at this point, these vaccine mandates should only be issued as a last resort. And that for now, we should rather encourage people to get vaccinated. We should ramp up the public education for the need for these COVID-19 vaccines, especially this education that we are talking about should occur in the local language. We think that disconnect has also created part of the problem. The Ghana Health Service or the Ministry of Health and Needs Agencies, especially the Ghana Health Service and the Food and Drug Authority, should also know the concerns of persons who are hesitant when it comes to this vaccination. And then the various groups that we have seen, government should reach out to them with targeted messages that addresses their concerns, backed by the relevant local data. So for us, we think that this is the way to go. You quite remember that some form of vaccine mandate, in a way, some mandate sort of was issued to health workers who are not being vaccinated, which came with some threat of potential job losses. On that score, we are of the opinion that those mandates should be withdrawn because ultimately it has the potential to reduce the stressed and depleted health workforce. Rather, these health workers should be made to produce evidence of a negative COVID-19 test so that they can all come to work and help all of us. this is also in line with what a lot of countries are practicing. So baseline, we think that at this point, when it comes to vaccine mandate, since government has officially not issued one, we believe that one, ramp up the public education, get the vaccines to the local community, talk to them in their local languages, address the issues of, in quote, anti-vaxxers, and we believe that through that approach, we can get a lot more persons getting themselves vaccinated, especially in the light of the fact that our case count is also going down. But above all, we still entreat everybody to keep to the preventive measures to ensure that we are all safe.
Very well. I want us to stay on the point of government turning to the compulsory vaccine mandate as a last resort. Now, under what circumstances would you say that the time is ripe for government to go ahead and make this move, given that we can attest to the fact that very few people are wearing their mask, are even adhering to the protocols, keeping their social distance. So at what point would you say that, okay, since people are not, sticking to the protocols and the rules, it's time for government to go ahead and say everyone needs to be vaccinated before they can go to certain places or even access certain services?
I mean, for us, the caveat is very simple. We have made a lot of suggestions and proposals, and we think that until all these suggestions, proposals have been exhausted by way of implementation, we should not be talking about, this compulsory mandate as we talk about. So, baseline, make sure that you educate the people. And it has to be seen. Take the vaccines to them, address the issues, send targeted messages. We need to clear all these bits. And then, when we think that in spite of everything, persons living in Ghana are not taking up the mandate, the vaccines, meanwhile the disease itself is also posing an existential threat to all of us, then of course we will then be in a position to say that that is the point. But until same is that, for now we think that we should go along the tangent of persuasion and education.
Very well. Doc, kindly hold on briefly. I want to return to Harry. Harry, you made the point that you're not necessarily against compulsory vaccine mandates, but you don't think we're ready. Can you expatiate on that point?
Yeah, so as Dr. Jansen has said, currently there are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misinformation regarding the vaccine. And if we don't correct those misconceptions and we attempt to impose it on people, it's going to fuel people's hesitancy. People are going to be more resentful, more resistant to the mandate that we want to operationalize. Now, we also live in a country where the political landscape is very polarized. People generally have some mistrust. So when you want to address those issues and you want to impose this on people, I think it's going to be counterproductive because it's not going to be effective. How are we even going to enforce this when you have not gotten the buy-in of the people that you want to bring that? But in any case, what is the end goal? What is the public health objective of vaccine mandates? You want to increase vaccine activity. You want to reach herd immunity. And with most of these outbreaks, for you to achieve herd immunity, you need to vaccinate a substantial percentage of the population. Already, Ghana is a population where we have more than 37% of us less than 15 years. And for that reason, they are not even eligible for vaccination. So you already have just around 63% of the population that you can, and that 63% includes those who are pregnant, those who may have some allergies and for some reason may not be able to take the vaccine. So what do you hope to achieve by making it mandatory? We also know that in terms of reducing transmissibility of the vaccine, of the virus, some people have still been fully vaccinated and then are still contracting the virus. What we know is that the vaccine will protect you from getting severe disease, and for that reason also being hospitalized and then death. These ones are assured. In terms of reducing the infection, the study is not very conclusive because some people still get the vaccine, then they still contract the virus. So it would even be very difficult to achieve the goal of herd immunity by simply trying to make it mandatory. Aside the resentment there is a large chunk of the population who will not be eligible and will not be able to achieve that. What we should do is that we should find a way of actually getting people, as Dr. Jackson said, educating them. And one strategy that I believe could be effective is that, the average Ghanaian has one or two health professionals that he or she trusts. Everybody has, we all have our personal doctors, our personal nurses, our personal pharmacists. If we can empower these people to consciously, in their engagement with patients, to talk to them about the vaccine, the fact that they are safe, the fact that, they protect you from getting seriously sick when you get the virus, I'm sure we can do something. So also look at, I don't think this, there's also another issue of the fact that we know the immunity that the vaccine gives you even wanes over time. And as it stands now, we don't even know how many boosters and how regular the boosters are going to come. Whether we're going to take it every year, every 2 years, the data is not very clear. So if you make it mandatory, how are you going to define somebody who is vaccinated? Is it somebody who has the first dose, who has taken all the necessary boosters, or what exactly do we plan to do? We should rather look for ways of enhancing the other protocols and then continue to encourage people to take the vaccine. So I believe that and then another issue is accessibility. Logistically, I think the Ghana Health Service is doing very well. But, if we can find a way for somebody to walk in and within 20 minutes, you are done with the vaccination process, I'm sure we can increase uptake. Because if I have to go and queue for 30 minutes, and then, you have to go through pre-counseling and everything. So you end up spending close to 1 hour to take one vaccine shot. It may also discourage people from taking it. So we should look for other ways of improving the uptake other than mandates.
Very well. Harry, hold that thought. Anita, I'll come to you too for you to get me some options into all these advisory vaccine in the face of less and less people adhering to the safety protocols. If you can kindly unmute your microphone so we can hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Good evening to your viewers. Good evening, MFS. So, first of all, I support what Mr. Harry said. The issue about vaccination, mandatory vaccination or mandates, is actually how do you define this term? And like he said, there is something that we have to all understand, and that is the concept of libertarian paternalism. The idea that we can actually get some positive response from people by also trying to maintain the right to choice. So this concept of vaccination is a social responsibility, but at the same time, we must also understand that something that is a social responsibility in that when you are vaccinated, you are likely to contract the virus, and in some way you are likely going to protect your family members and loved ones. We also have to understand that it is a choice. But in Africa, or generally, we tend to think the solution to headache is to cut the head off. I don't think that is going to help our cause at all. And one of the reasons why I believe it won't is because how much have we done in the sphere of informing and educating people about these particular vaccines? And have we really done enough to educate people to make them understand that it is for their own good? And we always just jump to the fact that, okay, the government can just issue some military stylized decree that can kind of solve all our problems. And this is not going to happen. A typical example is what is happening now, presently in Canada, where truck drivers are protesting against the mandatory vaccination because it's a choice and you cannot actually force people to take the vaccine. But of course, once we explain to them and we tread the line of libertarian paternalism, we can, as a matter of fact, get a positive result or positive response from folks by at the same time protecting their choice. And I think that's the best way to go. That's why I support Mr. Harris' opinion. I think it's quite good. We have to do more, and we have to define what exactly we mean by mandatory. Otherwise, we will just be, beating about the bush.
Very well. Let me return to Dr. Yankson so we can wrap up with him and let him go. Doc, where are we on the recommendations that the compulsory or the issuing of a directive that all health workers need to be fully vaccinated? If not, their jobs will be threatened. Have you got any feedback on that recommendation you made?
Well, not officially, but at least on the ground, nobody has lost his job as we speak. So we are closely monitoring the situation. We are quite certain that the authorities have also taken on board all that we have suggested. So for us, we still have that cordial environment at the workplace in terms of that particular directive. At least for now, nobody is being harassed to the best of our knowledge. So we are keeping close tabs on things.
Close tabs on things. Okay. Finally, before I let you go, Harry raised the issue of the need to get the buy-in of citizens or any other target group that we hope to get vaccinated. Where do you think the missing link is or the gap is in terms of information and getting them educated on why they need to go ahead and take these vaccines? That's if they even have the medical clearance to go ahead and do so. Are there any lapses or gaps that you have identified as Vice President of GMU and as a health professional as well? And how do you think we can bridge that gap?
Well, I think that clearly, the country has always had a risk communication or a risk and social mobilization, communication route. Except to say that in terms of the information really getting down to the people, backed by local and probably foreign scientific evidence and what have you, we have sort of not been able to clear that head up properly. And as a result, the misinformation seems to have actually taken the lead. And we are all sort of now battling against that misinformation, some of which have actually become entrenched in the minds of people. So clearly, it is the risk communication that we felt or we believe hasn't really gone down well to the people, and as a result, that lack of information has created a bigger problem. That's why we are recommending that we ramp up, education. Education is very key. There are all kinds of institutions that the state has that can be roped into do this. The NCCE, for example, has a mandate which clearly fits into this. The health service itself, government machinery, the media, stakeholders, civil society organizations. We can all work together to ensure that the right information is sent out there for our people to consume. And in the process, they will make very better and well-informed when it comes to the whole corporate approach.
Right. Doc, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Dr. Justice Yankson is the Vice President of the Ghana Medical Association. I also want to introduce Dr. Adam Senanu. He's with the Coalition of Public Health and Justice. Doc, good evening. Many thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Maria, and I don't have a doctorate yet.
Right. My apologies. Mr. Adam Senanu, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Very well. Now, your coalition has sued some 14 state agencies for supposedly or allegedly imposing a compulsory vaccination. Now, I've heard conversations going around that these are state entities who are just ensuring that their premises does not become or do not become breeding grounds for COVID infections. But your group seems to find that problematic and thinks this is just some way for government to institute a mandatory vaccine policy. Why is this such a problem for your group, and why the suit?
Well, there's a little bit of history, and I don't think we should say we see that it is government that is finding a route to put in place mandatory vaccinations. No, I think that the institutions are responsible for their own actions. These are 3 or 4 different groups that had concerns, and we came together. The doctors had written to the president. The president responded saying that, look, I haven't acted to put in place an executive instrument that makes restrictions of movement possible. And so I'm not quite sure, and I've not asked for any mandate on vaccination either. And then we wrote to the minister, we followed up with the ministry as well, and we don't find any executive instrument also in that space. What it means, therefore, is that any such correspondence, and in our suit, we've attached these institutions and what they've written to their members, that suggests that you cannot move freely or you cannot continue to perform your job, are illegal. And so we want the court to enforce that if you wanted this to be done, you ought to have had an executive instrument in place.
To do that. Right. And do you know of, because I asked the GMA Vice President, he said he's not aware that anyone has been, let go or been asked to go and proceed on leave until they are fully vaccinated. Do you have any cases recorded where some health workers or some people have said they weren't allowed to come to their jobs, or any citizen who wasn't allowed access because they were not fully vaccinated?
Well, we have not, we've not pursued that questioning so far. In fact, truth is, the bulk of the request or the pressure that this ought to be done is from the health sector. It's public health doctors and practitioners who have been unhappy with the various instructions and directives, who feel threatened and intimidated that you are not allowed to come to work if you haven't done this and so on and so forth. So as to whether any of them has been forcefully compelled not to go to work at home, I can't speak to that at the moment. I haven't heard any that line, except to say obviously the environment is not very conducive for the work that they do. Very well.
Kindly hold on for me. At this point, we went around to speak to some people to get their take on this topic we're having, whether or not there should be a compulsory vaccination policy in Ghana. We've been speaking to some people in Accra, and this is what they've been saying. Take a listen.
I don't know what happened, but I am by force because I want to do people to be our and Kadam Pay, but people do not want to try to be and fail to the but if I put you by force, I said to Congo anytime I go. You do my crown boy and said, Uncle, a better waste time so by force and go there. I had the more and said, and trade them. And
just like any vaccine, I mean, you shouldn't be mandated to take it. I believe that if the person feels he or she has to take it, why not? The person shouldn't be forced. You understand? It's an individual preference. So then I shouldn't be forced to take something which I don't believe in. So I believe it shouldn't be mandatory.
I think since it's a national issue and concerning our health, and if one is affected, it can affect many. So if it's a chronic thing that is affecting lives and the government thinks that is the best way to save our people and have a good community issues with health, on my side, I think it's a good thing to do. But we are in a democratic world and we have our freedom of living. And we just have to create awareness more to see the importance of why we need to do it. Definitely some will rebel, some wouldn't want to. But I think if it's a compulsion for everybody, it will be good. If it's still not working, then I think drastic measures must be taken to ensure we have a healthy community.
Maybe the mechanism is mandatory. And I say, I panena de abano. Opa no eso kowo. Unya se eso force o se kona kowo. Say by force. Who was the same draw free abrocha ba say by force. Yan konko. Yare bia ba yare bebre e wa ekumye. I don't force any was I is
I don't think it's supposed to be, compulsory, because it should be someone's will. Maybe if I want to do it, then I do it. It shouldn't be something compulsory. You see the thing, because it is about my health. It's not about any other.
It shouldn't be compulsory because when some people take it, they experience side effects. So some of them it's not good for their system. That's why they don't want to take it. So it shouldn't be compulsory. If you want to take it, you can take it. If you don't want to, fine.
So we know ayaba na ojaba and obi aye. So also ye because we ask no obi aye. Until say so yeah.
Yeah, we all know that vaccination, the COVID disease is not something that we need to joke with. Me per se, at my workplace, it was mandatory. If you are not vaccinated, you are not allowed to enter the workplace. So since it is something that has come upon us without we not being aware, we are all doing something that we would do just to protect ourselves from the disease. But looking at the misconception around the vaccine, it's a whole lot. But to me, if it is mandatory, I think it's going to help, because when we look at what amount that the government is spending when it's come to buying of PPEs and then hospital paying for those at the hospital, it's a whole lot. So for them to import the vaccine for we to take and for us to be free, I think it's going to cut the cost. So if it is mandatory, I think that one will be better.
It should be voluntary, because some people don't want to take it based on their health conditions, and otherwise they could have their personal reasons. But for myself, I've done it, so it's better everybody does it, but it shouldn't be by force.
Those were the views of some Ghanaians on whether or not the vaccine taking should be mandatory in Ghana. We will return to Mr. Senanu shortly, but let me come back to Anita. In terms of the advocacy and getting the buy-in of citizens as well as educating them, how do you think we can bridge the gap and speed up, the acceptance to this need for some persons who can take the vaccines to help us combat COVID-19 in Ghana?
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, the public education health education is still the way to go. So we can use we have what people will call unit committee members in the rural communities. Okay. We can use them. So they would teach, we go through them and we use the community information system. Most communities have these information systems. So we go through them and then we give the education in the local dialects or in the local languages. That is one. Then, of course, the chiefs, the queen mothers, they are able to convince the women more. So the queen mothers will be useful here. And also, we have, I wrote a,
okay, I think we're struggling with Anita's line. So let me bring in Sheung. Sheung, we were talking about last resort and when it will become critical for certain governments, or let me not even say certain governments, for the Ghanaian or the Ghana government to say that I think it's about time that everyone has to take the vaccine, at least those who are eligible to help us go ahead and minimize the infection rate in the country. At what point do you think it will be necessary for them to say that or make that statement? Sheung, if you can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Anita, I'll come back to you. We lost your line briefly, so kindly hold on. I'll return to you when Sheung is done with his submissions.
Oh, thank you, Mary. So I don't think the government has such authority to force people to take the vaccination, and I don't think at any point the vaccination is going to, the problem with COVID is going to escalate to such height where we will have to force people to get vaccinated. I don't think it will ever happen, because one thing we know for sure, for example, in Norway now, all restrictions as to the COVID menace or the pandemic has been lifted. So I don't think it will ever happen. But if you ask me, there are things that can be done. And one of those things is actually the government can play its role. I was mentioning earlier on about libertarian paternalism, and what I'm trying to say basically is, for example, if you refuse to be vaccinated, which is your choice, okay, when you come to work, you can be subjected to tests 3 to 4 times every week. So if you test positive, you have to stay away from work. you know, in each of the case whereby the government might choose to exercise their own liberty, whether to pay you or not, for working or not. I mean, there are so many ways, but you cannot force individuals. Otherwise, the backlash will be so, you know, it will be big, and people will start, you know, you will fuel their skepticism. You know, people have a lot of, innuendos concerning these vaccines. And for example, people are saying you went and brought it from abroad. You don't even know what the content is, and you can't really blame them. Africa as a whole, what exactly have we contributed to the development or to developing our own strain of these vaccines, or what exactly have we done? Nothing. And if people are not, you know, if people do not support this vaccination, you cannot force them. You cannot force them. The best way to go about it is to actually go to the community, like Anita said, and to explore all the public health information systems and try to, as much as possible, convince people that it is better to be vaccinated, not only for yourselves, but for your loved ones and relatives. I mean, and even for the people you do not like, but for the betterment of the society, it is better when you are vaccinated. Because come to think of it, there are a lot of controversies surrounding the vaccine, and one of which is this. It is called a vaccine, and there are instances of folks who have been vaccinated and they still went ahead, contracted the virus, and people died. Of course, the statistic is not so significant, but it has happened. And these are also reasons why people will be like, no, I don't want to take it. If I take it, how am I different from folks who have not? So I think the government at no point should force folks to take the vaccine. That is my submission.
Very well. Anita, I'll come back to you so you can wrap up that point, then I'll return to Mr. Senanu. So you have the floor. Go ahead. Right. I think we're struggling with Anita's line. So let me return to Adam Senanu. I understand we have him on Zoom now. Now, Mr. Senanu, what will be your response to persons who say we're quick to cite human rights abuses and legal issues instead of looking at the greater good or the national interest and saying that the more people that are vaccinated, the better for us. Even if it looks like a covert mandate, people should just, oblige and go ahead to that. What would be your response to that, to such comments?
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, I'm first and foremost a scientist before a management and development consultant. And as someone who's worked in research, the jury is out. Look, Africa did excellently in the absence of the vaccines. When we were denied access to vaccines, this continent did very well, and Ghana did well. The countries that have been at the foremost point of pursuing herd immunity, where we were told that if you got 80% of your population vaccinated, you will see a steady decline in the number of COVID cases. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened in Israel. It hasn't happened in Ireland. It hasn't happened in all the other countries. 4 out of the top 5 countries that have pursued herd immunity are now in chaos. They are 4th booster, 5th booster, So the theory has not matched with the reality of experience on the ground. Indeed, countries like Ghana, where we didn't have access to vaccines till probably last quarter of last year, did much, much, much better. Our records in Africa and Ghana, for example, are far better than the countries that have pursued herd immunity. And so, for some reason, there's a disconnect, there's a misfit between what we've been told by those scientists and what we're experiencing. I think that we ought to be studying what Africa did. What did our doctors do? In the absence of the vaccines, they recommended some of the drugs that in these other jurisdictions have been condemned. The ivermectins, the erythromycins, the hydroxychloroquines, and what have you. So in that context, to say that they are only thinking about the best interest, I think that the data on the ground does not fit that narrative. And it's one of the reasons why we should not pursue mandatory vaccinations. In any case, from the WHO's perspective, ethical considerations are strong. They say that mandatory vaccination has to be the very last resort where there are no options or alternatives. Some of us are not convinced that there are no alternatives or options that we can pursue, especially given how well we performed as a country and as a continent. There are other alternatives and options, so we cannot just rush into that. So vaccinations can continue, those who are inclined to taking it. That's right. But let's not intimidate, especially our health sector workers. They are not happy at all. They feel like they are committing a crime by serving the nation. Let's make it more comfortable for them to be able to serve this nation.
Very well. Mr. Senanu, thank you very much. Kindly hold on. I want to return to Anita. Anita, you are attempting to draw for us a roadmap on how to bridge the education gap to ensure that more people have very reliable and accurate information, as well as the COVID-19 and its vaccination is concerned. So if you can wrap up that point, and then I'll return to Harry.
Okay. So please, can you hear me? Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was saying that, yeah, so we go through the leaders in the rural communities, which for me is the best way to go, especially in the, interlands, the northern, in deep northern region, and then the eastern region where we have people that speak different languages. So we should do that. And another thing is we use the radio stations, the jingles. More of the jingles should be in P, pleading with people to go for it and telling them the benefits of being vaccinated. Because all this while we've been going for vaccinations, our children have been vaccinated, nothing has happened. We know that this one, the interval was short, and the vaccine was, made, just between a year or so, but it is still safe. So I think we just have to implore people to educate them more to get vaccinated. I think, and then through the television, just like what we are doing here, local languages still is the best, because most people too, they don't understand English. So we have to balance it up. So for me, I think that's just the best way to go. And just like I think someone mentioned that an average Ghanaian has a doctor or a nurse he or she trusts. That is very true. You get it? So I think those people should be able to convince them to maybe go for it when necessary, yes. But we shouldn't intimidate anybody to go for the vaccination. That's what I think.
Very well. Harry, you mentioned finding other alternative ways instead of an imposition, and you cited some of the things Anita has rehashed, which include education. From your pharmaceutical point of view, are there any other additional ways that you can proffer to ensure that we see, more and more people subscribe to this vaccination, and, even being willing to go ahead and walk into any health facility to get the jab?
Thank you very much. So from, if you look at the videos you played, from what people are saying, I was a bit surprised that some people seem to have an issue with the fact that it's from outside. Because from my practice as a pharmacist, when it comes to other modes of vaccine, it's very foreign ones. So I thought that I would also reflect this one, but that's a discussion for another day. So we could, I think we should increase the access. For those who haven't been vaccinated, not all of them are necessarily affected or anti-vaxxers. Some of them simply want a seamless way that they can get the vaccine. If we can increase the centers and even use the community pharmacies, and education, as Dr. Anita said, I once had the opportunity to speak to some people at a Presbyterian church somewhere in Kaswa, and it was supposed to be a 45-minute interaction on vaccines. We ended up spending about close to 2 hours. And after the interaction, the feedback was very great. People were now convinced, and people were now more willing to take the vaccine. So we need to take the education to the people. We need to use the local education to people on the ground, through the mosques, the churches, the schools, and so on and so forth. And then on the long term also, we may need to consider local manufacturing of vaccine. I mean, we don't need to start from scratch. We can do fill and finish, because it seems to me that the tape that you played, some people might probably accept it more if it is coming from our own territory. And I also want to, I agree a lot with Mr. Edem, but I want to disagree on some aspect of the Israel analysis. I want to believe that if Israel didn't have that level of vaccine, we will probably be dealing with more serious cases that we are dealing with. Even though, I mean, high vaccination rates, and then if you look at the third and the fourth booster, Israel targeted the high risk. They didn't give the third and fourth booster to everyone universally. They were targeting the 60 years and those with chronic conditions, because their target was as much as possible to bring down the COVID-19 related death. Right. So my point here is that the education is something indispensable, but we have to find a way of making sure the education goes down to the people, because the government is doing a lot. The Ghana Health Service is educated, it's mainly in the English language, national televisions. The average person in the market doesn't get what this education, and then doesn't get the information. So we can go to the schools, the churches, the mosques, the lorry stations, anywhere we can, the malls, we can find people gathered. Then we let this information get down to the last person. I'm sure if people are convinced, we can increase the vaccine uptakes.
Very well. Mr. Senano, I'll give you the final word. Now, Dr. Yankson cited a last resort at that point when all other efforts or avenues have failed, including people not adhering to safety protocols, not wearing the mask. At that point, will that change your stance, or you say, regardless of whatever the situation is on the ground, people shouldn't be forced to take the vaccines? Would you change your stance if we get to that last resort point, like Dr.
It's a last
Yankson
resort where I mean, when we say last resort, it means that the data tells you that this is the only option you have. And absolutely, for all of us, it's about a clinical analysis of the data. The data shows that these are the only options you have. That's the way you go.
Right.
So it's about being very incisive about the analysis. What does the data show? I'm looking forward to data on the vaccines that we have used so far. Something with fully randomized designs and control groups, so we can tell what is really working on the ground. I'll really invest a lot more in local research. What did we do right? And yes, local vaccine production to something that would build a lot of confidence, so that people are not too worried. Is there something in this that we don't know? So yes, if it's the last resort and data supports that, why not?
Very well. I'm grateful for your time. Thank you very much for speaking to us. It's always a pleasure. Edem Senanu is with the Coalition of Public Health and Justice. We also spoke to Dr. Justice Yankson, who is the Vice President for the Ghana Medical Association, as well as Anita Samoa, a public health advocate, and Harry Amwenin Otre, who is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana, and Oluwaseun Oyebamiji joined us from Turkey as a contributor. That's all we have time for on Opposing Views. We'll see you same time next week at 5 p.m. My name is Marie-France Fojo. Enjoy the rest of your evening.